want to ask you about BRICS as a whole. So, we know our listeners hopefully know that BRICS is an economic alliance, not a military alliance. But
Yes.
war and economics go hand in hand. So, is it morally acceptable for BRICS to pursue a peaceful course to achieve their goals, while civilians are in like their strategic countries? So, like, say, like Syria is under attack. Syria is likely going to be a candidate for BRICS in the future. We already have Iran and Saudi Arabia who could get embroiled in this war, also planning to be in BRICS in 2024. Does it ever become BRICS's obligation to step in and try to prevent that from happening, because it has such grave economic consequences for the plans that they already had? And if so, what do China and Russia do in that instance? Because I don't, I'm sure you agree, but I see them as the leaders of BRICS, probably.
Yes, absolutely, Sarah. They are the de facto leader of BRICS and the de facto leaders of BRICS 11, of expanding towards BRICS 11, and probably this year BRICS 15, 18, or maybe even BRICS 20, before or during the summit in Kazan late next year. In terms of never expect BRICS to have a military role. That's not the point. As you should not expect, all of you around the world, you should not expect the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to have a military role, at least in the short to medium term. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization this is very, very important, because they will be merging sooner rather than later, or maybe in the medium term. The key problem inside BRICS and inside the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, I'm sure I don't have to spell it out to all of you, is India. Unfortunately, and this is something that you confirm when you talk to Russian analysts, to Chinese analysts, to Iranian analysts, and even to some independent Indian analysts as well. Because when we talk about India, it's not that enormous framework. No, it's the Modi government, the people around Modi, the people Modi is trying to seduce all the time. Let's say the nouveau riche business classes in India, and the Hindutva anti-Muslim fanatics. So this is an enormous problem. And of course, going deeper, the absolutely stratospheric inferiority complex of the Indian ruling classes vis-a-vis the white man. This is something very, very hard to say, but I prefer to say it bluntly. All of us, or all of you who have been to India, you can see that in front of you. It's changing little by little, but it's changing in a very perverse way, because in many cases, the inferiority complex in terms of, being subjugated by the white man is being transferred to intolerance vis-a-vis the Muslim population. This is absolutely horrible. It's so I would say this is one strand. Of course, it's the majority of the population. They don't even think about the majority of the Indian population is basically preoccupied with survival. And I'm not joking about it. I'm talking about at least 600 to 700 million people. India is still an extremely poor and backward country if you get out of the big urban centers. If you go, for instance, to Patna, if you go to deep India, wow, it's nothing much changed, even considering the economic miracle that started maybe in the late 90s. But the problem is with a government like Modi's, and considering his constituency and considering the toxic Hindutva elements around, it's very hard to see how they can accommodate China, especially, and China inside SCO and BRICS, and Pakistan inside the SCO, especially because they see Pakistan as a vassal of China. which is not the case. They are economic partners. It's different. And that explains, among other things, why Modi and his government is always extremely reticent in normalizing relations with China, economic relations, trade relations inside the BRICS. Or even worse, very simple things, accepting to trade in yuan. The Russians already they sent the message to the Indians, look, okay, you're buying a lot of our oil, fantastic, but what are we going to do with this pile of rupees? Nobody wants a pile of rupees, So they're trying to find a way for the Russians to spend these rupees, or at least, buy something with these rupees, because India doesn't have anything to sell. They are buying energy like crazy. That's a completely different story. So, and they refuse, of course, to have their settlement payments in yuan. So as long as you don't solve these problems inside BRICS, for instance, the progress of the multilateral organization as a whole is seriously compromised. And inside the SCO, it's complicated because India is still hedging their bets in terms of, okay, we are members of the Quad, and now we're going to be members of IMEC. This is the absolute opposite of what the Russians and the Chinese are doing, where they are little by little, slowly but surely, integrating projects of BRI, the New Silk Roads, and the Eurasia Economic Organization, the Eurasia Economic Union, I'm sorry. This is something I will see in Moscow again in a few days. I'll be back in Moscow in 2 weeks. And I always talk to the Eurasia Economic Union people while I'm there. And they tell me in detail the problems inside these multilateral organizations, especially in terms of coordinating economic policy and the drive towards de-dollarization, or even the drive to settle trade in bilateral currencies. It's an extremely complicated dossier, all of that. And it's all interlinked. So to cut the story short, the spoiler in all these interactions is India. And the Americans know it. And the Americans, of course, they keep sending an enormous amount of carrots to the Indians to bring them to the hegemon camp. And the latest one is exactly IMEC. But when the Indians look at how long will it take to have IMEC working for their Indian benefit, you have to build 1,000 kilometers of highways over here, you have to modernize port over there, and all that. They say, this is not going to work. But they cannot say that to the Americans. And also because they have their own connectivity corridor, which is the International North-South Transportation Corridor, the INSTC, which is Russia, Iran, and India as the main partners. And that's also anathema for, guess who? The hegemon. The problem is they cannot disturb this directly. They cannot create problems inside Russia. Okay, to a large extent, they can have skirmishes. They cannot attack Iran directly, although they would love to, the Strauss-Nilcomb cycles. And obviously, they have to protect their Indian investment on. But when the INSTC will be fully functioning, example, you charge something in Moscow or St. Petersburg, it goes to Astrakhan, the Russian port in the Caspian. It crosses the Caspian by ship. It gets to the Iranian shore of the Caspian. It crosses Iran by road or railway. It arrives at the Persian Gulf of the Gulf of Oman, and then is sent by tankers to India. When this thing is fully functioning both ways, wow. In terms of a connectivity corridor of let's say, a parallel Silk Road with the three main players, Russia, India, and Iran, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So that's that. So expect the Americans trying to do something to disturb this in the, I would say, medium to long term.